Thank you. All right. It's good to be back after 30 minutes. I wanted to share with you guys a session I've started doing, and I'm just starting to take out on the road. And I released it last week in Nashville, Tennessee, when I was down there speaking. And I wanted to share it with you guys because I like to not only talk like Joe and I did in figure out and debunk and demystify things that are going on in our business in terms of our marketing and our strategies and the way we think, but I also want to look at things that help us just as people and the way we operate and the way we work as professionals in this business. So my session is basically called So You Want to Be a Rock Star. And that's a term that's thrown around in this industry a lot. Like, this person's a rock star, that person's a rock star, I'm a rock star, you're a rock star. And honestly, it's a little tiring to me. And the reason why it is because I think about people like Keith Richards. And I love Keith Richards, and I love the fact that Keith Richards is a legendary rock star. And he will outlive us all. And he even quit drinking, so he's even like, he's raised that bar even more. So the thing about Keith, though, is, in the Stones in particular, they are legendary rock stars. And I want to sort of take stories from the legends and take you through some things to look at how you're operating yourself and how you're operating your stores and holistically looking at the business as a whole. So why are we here, right? We want to be great. You know, we come to these sessions, we come to these things because we want to learn more. We want to be better. We want to be great. We want to exceed. We want to make an impression, right? And we want that to be profitable. So what I want to do with you guys today is I want to define a rock star versus a one-hit wonder or a flash in the pan. Because I think that's very important. Because there's a lot of rock stars out there, but there are only so many that are truly legendary. And follow along with me because I'm gonna make my case. But first and foremost, here's what defines, working through. I think I pulled this from Rolling Stone. But here's the thing about rock stars in general, right? They have talent, they have effort, there's determination. They attract attention for doing or producing something. That is the commonality between rock stars and one-hit wonders. Come on. But legendary rock stars do all of those things. Excuse me, I'm spitting out some hummus there. Legendary rock stars do all of those things continuously over time. This is very important. Again, they do all of these things continuously over time. There's a methodology, there's a process. And see, one-hit wonders don't keep a connection to their audience or understand the need to change. Anybody know who these bozos are? Thank you, that's so good. Everyone's fast on that. You can tell Toronto's like a new wave town, right? Yeah, there's still some of their stuff I think is badass, but again, that's why one-hit wonders don't stick around. They can be rock stars. One-hit wonders can totally be rock stars. I'm sorry if I'm blocking my screen. They can be, but they just don't understand that process and that need to change and grow.
Was that you in the sunglasses?
That is me in the sunglasses there, but my head's down so you can't recognize me. Here's Johnny Reelgood, and the reason why I want to talk about this is Urban Dictionary defines the rock star as this, and I want to read this to you. Here's Urban Dictionary's definition of a rock star. A person who always delivers the goods. If they say they're going to do something, they do it. Rock stars tend to downplay their success and don't like attention. They simply deliver consistent results and say little. That's really important because, see, automotive rock stars don't do that at all. We're going to tell you all fucking day how awesome we are, right? All day long we're going to tell you, and we're going to tell you, and we're going to tell you, and we're going to get in our cars in the morning, and we're going to shoot ourselves in the car in the morning. We're going to tell you how awesome we are and how great things are going to be. And I'm not taking shots at my buddy back there who's trying to do educational content. I'm talking about all those people that are great leaders and motivators and just tell me what they ate for breakfast this morning and how much brand is moving through their system while they drive to the dealership to be another rock star day. And Johnny Rotten is that person. Johnny Rotten is the person who's going to tell you how much of an impact he had on punk rock. You guys know who this is, right? Johnny Rotten, the Sex Pistols. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, the Sex Pistols broke out of England. Here's the thing. The Sex Pistols were created just like the Monkees were. If you can believe it. Malcolm McLaren created this band. These guys didn't create this band. Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Joey Ramone, Dee Dee Ramone. Those guys met. They worked together in garages. They formed their bands. The Sex Pistols were created as an act. Like, these guys were such an act, and they were perfect for the British market. But by the time he actually took these guys on the road, their first little U.S. tour crushed these guys. Like they couldn't even pull it off on the road. Rotten learned later on and created other acts. But the Sex Pistols as a band couldn't even do like 8 or 9 dates in the States. Sid Vicious got all strung out on even more heroin, killed his girlfriend, then himself, and the band broke up. Like, again, just a nightmare. But this guy will tell you they are solely responsible for punk rock. And I will tell you something, Detroit, Michigan was responsible for punk rock, the home of automotive. You know, MC5, the Stooges. Like Iggy Pop and the Stooges came out of Detroit in the late 60s, basically playing punk rock. And as Iggy put it, I think we killed the Summer of Love. Right? So there you go. Detroit, I think, created punk rock, and Detroit also is a home of automotive. So again, let's look at that, because Rotten will always take credit for the work. And again, you have to remember that the people who sometimes speak the loudest may not always be delivering true work or truth in their music. So let's talk about some stories now that help us understand things that we can understand at our dealership, but we can understand them through the stories of some legendary rock stars. And there's a dedication to doing the work. So keep your enemies close. Not these two, not Mick and Keith, but the people, like what happened with these guys. And I'll back up and I'll tell this story. Mick and Keith and the Stones were basically a glorified blues cover band. They love the blues, right? If you know anything about both of these guys, Keith Richards in his biography still feels that Mick Jagger is the best blues harmonica player he's ever heard. That's pretty high praise for Keith Richards, who is like a disciple of blues music. But all they were doing is touring Europe and playing blues music in their early days. And the Beatles were doing the same. Beatles were doing covers, but then Paul and John started writing stuff, right? McCartney and Lennon were writing music, and they knew how to write hooks. The Stones manager saw that their profitability was based on their need to change, their need to start writing their own stuff. But the Stones couldn't do it. They could play their asses off. They could play dirty riffs, and they could play blues all night long. So what the Stones manager did was he made a deal and said, we'll give Paul and John, give us some writing tips. Help us understand how to write and craft a song. You give me what you guys are doing to do that. Help Mick and Keith, and we'll give you riffs. So Keith was trading riffs for tips on how to write music. And then the manager locked them in a room together. Mick and Keith got locked in a room together for a weekend, 3 or 4 days, and they weren't allowed to come out until they wrote their first song. They dedicated themselves to doing that work. And it's interesting because Richards talks about it now, and he says the minute they got that first song locked down, it was like a tap that was turned on that he can never turn off. But it was dedication to doing the work and something that was going to make them more profitable. So take a page out of those stores that you see. There's stores we all look at, right? There's stores that are our McCartneys and our Lennons. Stores that go, wow, they do great work. I have my great friend Kevin Fry down in Cincinnati, the Weiler Automotive Group. You know, Kevin's group, they do good work. It's not necessarily taking it exactly as they're doing it, but you can find those good things, those good pieces that you can apply and figure out your own way and putting your own spin on it. Because even after Keith and Mick learned it, the press still thought the Beatles and the Stones were doing this, and all the time in the back, they're passing tips back and forth to continue to help each other evolve. So you can take things from your friend's story. You don't have to punk it exactly, but you can take it and put your own spin on it and make it your own, and that's the dedication to doing the work. Anybody know who these guys are?
The Smiths.
Thank you, the Smiths. Arguably, and the critics, well, not even arguably, like British critics and critics around the world have called these guys one of the most influential bands ever to come out of the British independent music scene. These guys broke in Manchester in 1982, and to this day, like, you still hear their stuff in movies, you hear their stuff in commercials. Like Johnny Marr, the guitarist over here, just released Call the Comet, brilliant solo album. Like, they're still making music. Morrissey was like a really, had a great solo career. He's a complete whack job. But for these guys as a band, when the Smiths broke in '82 in Manchester, they were literally this band that were going to be like the next Beatles or the Stones out of England, and they only made it 5 years. They couldn't get past 1987 as a band. And the reason they couldn't was because of personality. Their dedication to doing the work wasn't there because they couldn't get past each other's personalities. And the personality was this. You got Marr, the guitarist, who wanted to expand and grow and use more instruments and more people playing on the albums and things like that. And Morrissey didn't like that. Morrissey in the middle, he wanted to start doing 60s covers. So all this work and all this like hype that they started and they were getting, like all this momentum, the personalities were clashing, but they were putting they were just basically setting their lines in the sand and not budging. Marr wanted to go this way musically, and Morrissey just wanted to do covers. And they got so stuck on that that's what broke up the band. You've got all of the success. You've got these albums coming out. You've got record labels like throwing money at you. All of this like potential, and you blow it all because your personalities are just clashing that much over you want to do covers and you want to use more musicians. That's it. But again, I bring this back to think about how many times in our business or with our teams that we get our lines in the sand with people. Right? We get those moments where someone on a team or maybe someone else in another department does something and it ticks you off. And it sets you on the wrong path internally, like the culture in your store. How many times do you see another manager or another staff or someone do something and you go, well, I'm not going to do it because that person always does it. Or this person just said this in our leadership or our sales meeting and I don't agree with that, so I'm not going to do it. Like there's just these small things that are character defects of ours where we get offended or our feelings get hurt, but we allow it to get hurt enough that we let it affect the culture in our stores or the culture at our businesses. And it's small personality things that there's a saying called live and let live, and I will be very candid with everybody in the room and those watching at home. But I'm a 25-year guy in Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's a slogan called live and let live. Like I don't have to agree with everything I hear every day, and I'm not going to agree with everything I need to hear every day. But sometimes I have to take it and I have to let it go. And sometimes when we're working, we have to take things in and we have to let it go. We can't like overreact and get emotional about everything. Sometimes we have to let our teams communicate things because you know what? Maybe they've done a bit of work and maybe they've come up with something for the reason why they're going to do the things they do. But that is where personalities get into play, and that's where you've got to dial stuff back, and you can't let those things get in your way in order to do good business as a team or as an organization or interdepartmentally in your dealerships or your stores. All right. Here's understanding the tech. This is really important. The key to longevity is to learn every aspect of music that you can. No better person to tell the story than the man here in Prince, and it's a damn shame he's not around anymore. But here's the thing you should know. He's performed consistently, by the time of his death, over 40 years, 39 studio recordings that he did himself, not to mention all the publishing and writing he did for other people, all the engineering he did, and usually on his albums he played every single instrument. I recommend you go look at his halftime show. NFL Films did a little, what's that? Yeah, by far the greatest halftime show at a Super Bowl ever. But NFL Films even did a short about it with all the production guys talking about working with him in this torrential rainstorm. In 40 years, it never rained on a Super Bowl. And they said the rain was coming in sideways into the upper booth. And this guy's on stage, on slippery tile, and he's platform shoes. His backup dancers are in 8-inch heels, and he's being passed live guitars the whole time. Live instruments, thunderstorm going on, and Prince is knocking it out of the park. And the one thing they said, like, is there anything we can do? And all he said was, can we make it rain harder? You know what I mean? Like one of the guys was like, and this is Prince, and he tore it apart. And you watch that, and that's someone understanding the conditions, the performance, the production, everyone around him. And even watching him, if you watch this short, pay attention, there's a part where he walks down the catwalk of the stage and the two dancers come down his side and he's playing his ass off and he's in the middle of some, like he's in his zone, and he turns and he doesn't see them, but it's just the way he turns and moves through them with his guitar. Because you see, you can go on YouTube fails and see people get hit in the head like that when you shared with us the other day. Remember the guy swung the guitar and hit the singer in the head? This is not Prince. Prince is too smooth for this. Even with all of this chaos going on around him and people all over the floor in these Super Bowl halftime shows, Prince is still moving, like knows where every single person and piece of equipment is in this pouring rainstorm. It's amazing. Even to the fact where he's done stuff where he's done like 6-hour concerts, like Montreal, and I'll get to that later, but very famous story about the Montreal Jazz Festival just a few years ago, even 2 years before he died, I think. 6 hours, got on stage at midnight, played till 6 in the morning. That's just knowing your stuff. Like the man's incredible. So the true stars learn technology inside and out at the dealerships, and we were talking about that earlier in our earlier session. It is true, like learn everything. Technology is going to come into the dealerships, guys, whether you like it or not. You have to use it. It's going to evolve with or without you. And that's the ironic thing is, like, say to everybody, if you've got pushback at your store and someone's like, I'm just not technically savvy, ask this question. Hey, everybody, hold up your smartphones. Does anyone in this room here not have a smartphone? Anybody? Like, you know, I know Bill's not connected to his provider, but he still has a smart, he has no connectivity. He's totally off the grid right now.
Make notes.
Exactly. You can still make notes, but you're still using it. But I always do that anytime someone says, I'm not technically savvy. I'm like, hey, can you put my contacts in your smartphone? And they do that. And I'm like, dude, you own a smartphone. You own something that can launch a fucking rocket, for God's sakes, right? We can do everything with these stupid phones. We have so much power in our hands. So there's not one person on your team that's allowed to say, I'm not technically savvy. There's too much power in our hands that we have to use, like it or not, because it moves without us. And that's something that we have to remember. Just remember on that. And also remember, too, that like I was saying about learning your technology and understanding the data of it, like Prince understood his music, is we are seeing that we said earlier, we're seeing a 15% drop in traffic at the dealership in walk-in traffic. But people that are understanding their technology and their time are actually keeping their appointments up 17%, right? So it's just using it and understanding it. Unless you're these guys. These guys didn't understand anything, really. They didn't understand English. They didn't speak English. They didn't really know what they were doing most of the time or any of that part. Everyone knows Milli Vanilli for what they didn't know. But one-hit wonders at our dealerships, though, those sharks usually hide the fact that they know little about the technology. Like, you can have a 60-car-a-month guy in your dealership, and I guarantee you if Joe went in and opened up the CRM, he's nowhere in there. Because he's burning through ups. Like your biggest rock stars are the people that don't know anything about technology, and they're hurting the data. That whole garbage in, garbage out starts because of your top performers aren't using something, and if they're not using something, that'll go.
If I will, there's an old gentleman at a store in Georgia, and he sells $35 per month. He doesn't know how to log into a CRM to save his life, but he can barely write his name. But they will print out numbers for him of his old customers on CRM, and he'll call 40 people in a day. He's not afraid to talk to customers. But that's that portion where I said, you don't need to teach Mo how to use the CRM. He's too damn old. They're not going to.
As long as someone's leveraging the CRM to help Mo.
But they hired somebody to literally be his administrative assistant in the CRM. You saw 35 cars. They created a tier system where once you hit 20 cars a month consistently 2 months in a row,
right,
they hire you your own assistant for $500
there you go.
a week.
Mo's just a stereotypical one-shoe dirty leg.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Different store, same.
Let's talk about understanding the data and how it holds others accountable to it as well. All right. And I ain't talking about love. I'm talking about data. Everyone knows this gentleman, right? Diamond Dave from Van Halen. Everybody thinks Dave's kind of a crackpot, right? Everyone knows Dave Lee Roth from Van Halen. Guy's kind of nuts. Eddie's. What's that? Right. So this is Roth, but here's an interesting story about David Lee Roth that Henry Rollins tells. So Henry Rollins, one of the godfather of hardcore punk. So Rollins does a lot of speaking and has his own interview show and goes around and interviews all these great people. Rollins talked about going to see Ted Nugent as a 16-year-old in Washington, D.C. Him and Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat went to see Ted Nugent, and this unknown band from California, Van Halen, was opening up for Nugent that night. And he said these guys came out and they destroyed. Like, they were so good. And then what happened was Nugent came out after and apparently had technical issues, and so the crowd started chanting for more Van Halen to get them out because Nugent's band was just tanking so bad. And apparently Ted, because Ted's a pretty stable guy himself. Ted had a meltdown apparently at the show. So Rollins was talking about not only just seeing Van Halen for the first time in the scenario around it, because also that's like Nugent not understanding his audience, not understanding the CX of the performance. But Rollins went up and finally met David Lee Roth and talked about that show. And the thing Rollins said that stood out to him was David Lee Roth, like a calculator, automatically remembered how many tickets were sold at the gate, what they sold at their own merch table that night, and what pieces and how much. They said he was just like a machine. And it was the first thing he said about the show. It wasn't like, oh, I'm glad you saw us. No, we sold that many tickets that night. Our take was this. Our merch was this. We sold this many T-shirts. We sold this many albums. And he said apparently about Roth that's Roth's understanding of the data. Does anyone know why they pulled out the M&Ms? Van Halen pulled it out. Van Halen had the rider, right? Everyone knows the rider, the M&Ms, right? Van Halen had it in their rider. You got to pull all the brown M&Ms out of the package. Like, we want a big bowl of M&Ms, and you got to pull all the brown M&Ms out. It was in every rider, buried in a contract in the back. And everyone after that did it to be like, I'm going to one-up Van Halen and do something even goofier. The reason why they did this was to hold people accountable. So Roth understood the data, but apparently in an early tour, they had a stage kind of collapse, like not collapse, it hurt people, didn't kill anybody, but the lawsuits and the insurance started flying around. And Van Halen realized because they are part of this machine, they are also part of the groups that could be sued for someone being injured. And so what they realized was that promoter and that production team weren't taking the safety factors in account. They weren't keeping their people safe. They put that rider into their contracts, deep into the contract, and if they didn't do it, they wouldn't play because they knew the promoters and the producers weren't accountable. They weren't reading their contracts. They weren't paying attention to what Van Halen was dictating for their, as soon as they saw that, they go, these guys don't care about anything. They just want the gate. They're not taking care of people's safety or anything else. So that's why the old M&M story was actually true, was because they wanted to hold people accountable for their stuff. And that's why I want you guys to hold, rockstar managers understand how data can help them build better things. A rockstar manager is a guy who, like a legendary guy, is looking at data. For instance, so with Next Up, we have floor traffic data, right? We can see the walk-in traffic, we can see the appointments shown, we can see how many times a manager intros. But a manager is using data like that, or they're going into the CRM, or they're doing something. If they're a service director or a parts manager, but they're using their data to take the time to coach somebody up. Help them out, mentor them up, make them a better salesperson, a service advisor, make them a better parts person. It's all about mentoring, because if you're a manager and you're like, I'm too busy, so I'm going to lock myself away in my office cave, or I'm just going to desk deals all day, you're actually not doing what you've been paid to do, and that's coach people and train people. And we hear it, right? Like Wayne Gretzky couldn't coach hockey worth beans, right? Gretzky was the best hockey player in the whole world, can't coach a hockey team. So, your 60-car guy dude may not be a great manager, and they have to be people that are good with people to help people and empower people. So that's the thing about understanding your data and understanding how things run, because you have to be that person that can take a new person that comes into the store and really, welcome them into it. And I give dealers a ton of credit, because when I owned my agency, I knew nothing about the automotive segment whatsoever. I knew nothing about dealership business. I knew nothing about automotive advertising, but the dealer principals were the guys that taught me everything I needed to know about the business. And I'm grateful to those guys. I didn't learn it from the OEMs because I worked at a tier 1 agency. I owned my own little small agency, and I worked with dealers, and they taught me all about the automotive business. And I thought that was really telling, because their people also have to bring in all the new people and do the same thing. Their managers have to remember that too, and I think sometimes managers get a little lost on target. Now, Chuck Berry, on the other hand, in understanding your data or understanding your contracts or what you're writing up for people, Berry didn't understand that. Chess Records was the record company that produced a lot of early 50s acts. Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, a ton of them. And Alan Freed was a DJ in New York City who was playing all this rock and roll that was coming out. Thing is, Freed was in Chess Records' back pocket. Chess Records was giving him publishing rights and royalties on their artist recordings, while Freed, in exchange for Freed playing it on the radio. So on the first recording and pressing of Chuck Berry's Maybelline, one of the most famous rock recordings, Freed had publishing rights on that. Freed had publishing credit on that. So Chuck Berry was making basically about 1/2 cent on everything he was selling. And he didn't read the contract, and even he says it in his biography. I didn't read my contract. I didn't read anything, and I learned the hardest lesson right away. But at the time of Barry's death, like Barry was a dude that if we had him playing this, he can't because he's dead, but if he was playing it, if he came in, Jason would have to pay him in cash before he even walked up on stage. Barry traveled light. He goes, just get me this backup band, I'll tell him how to play it. But you give me a bag of money before I walk up on that stage, or I'm not walking up on that stage, and he'd take his money home. Like he left at closing, I think like his estate was worth about $12 million when he passed away, but now it's worth like an estimated $50 million because of his publishing and stuff. But he learned that hard lesson right away and learned everything he had to do. He managed his own stuff, he wrote his own publishing deals, he did everything his way after that because he was so stung. And I think his mom, I think the quotes here, what does his mom say is something about like, I don't know, don't let the same dog bite you twice or something like that. But, one hot wonders though, like they don't understand the data, so they burn through ups, right? One hit wonders will burn through a lot of ups, and they'll create a really lousy environment and a culture at your store. They just won't like it. And, but they, And it really does affect everyone. And they look at social media and the landscape, right? Like, so people who want to be rock stars and don't understand using data to make themselves better, they just want to use social media and they want to use their, I've got my own way of selling cars and I don't do what everyone else does because I'm a social media rock star and I got to put my stuff on Instagram every day. And my whole take on that is this, is like being Instagram famous is like being rich in Monopoly. So just remember that next time where you're sort of coveting what someone may have up on social media, because you can make yourself whatever you want on social media. You really can. It does not take a lot of time, nor it does take any effort. But the real truth is the work, right? So like one-hit wonders, they don't understand the work and they don't understand how data ladders into that. And putting a premium on CX is a big thing for legendary rock stars. Everyone knows these two, Bruce Springsteen, Clarence Clemens. This picture was taken 44 years ago. 44 years ago, and these guys are ripping it out, right? Everyone and everyone sees this picture of Springsteen and they get it. Like, someone tell me, give me, I would just go around the room, shout out someone that, if someone said, I'm going to go, I haven't gone to see concerts in a long time. It's been 5 to 10 years since I've gone to see a live concert. Who should I go see? Just tell me anybody. You tell, like, without even blinking, who you'd go see. Doesn't matter. And don't be funny. Like, someone that you go, like, no matter, every time I see them, they kill.
Train.
Who?
Train.
Okay. Joe, come on, you see a lot of live music. But who would you say, though? Like, who's that person that you go, you know what? If you're going to go see somebody, this person never disappoints. Come on.
Brad Paisley.
Thank you, Brad Paisley. Madonna, okay.
I would say Kiss.
Kiss? Great. Garth Brooks.
Steel Panther.
Roger Waters.
Steel Panther. Roger Waters. Everyone's got one. One of mine's like Fishbone from L.A. Or, I've got them. Like, Sheryl Crow just played here last week. Like, Sheryl Crow played at Budweiser stage. Like, I'm a punk rock kid that grew up in the 80s in that scene, but I've seen Sheryl Crow live, and she tears it up. She is so good live. So again, but those are the things that we can, when you think about it, you can really pull those people up right away. You can tell people, and that's what this is all about. And Springsteen said it best: sustaining an audience is hard. It demands a consistency of thought, of purpose, and of action over a long period of time. How do we start this? It's doing these things continually over a long period of time. And Springsteen talks about that, right? It is that. And that is that CX, right? So leadership teams should be placing that onus, because when you go see Springsteen in concert, he's going to give you 3 hours of blood, sweat, and tears, and he's going to sing to you. And people talk about going to see Springsteen, and if they're close to the stage, they're like, he was singing right to me the whole time. Right? People talk about that at shows like Springsteen. Springsteen touches people. Like Kiss, Garth Brooks, Madonna. It doesn't matter. If you're dialed into those shows and there's someone that really goes the extra mile to have, like, U2, you name it. Those shows are so big. But that performance at your dealership, just the fact of walking in and making that person's visit that memorable for them, that they go away and say, hey, who should I buy a car from? Buy from Brandon's Toyota. Like, that performance was amazing. Like, everything about everyone I met, everything I looked at, everything I touched, talked to, drank, ate at the store, everything was, like, incredible. I would go back there every time I needed to buy a car. That is that same thinking of, like, Springsteen puts so much into every concert he plays. So are you putting so much into every visitor that comes through, or are you pre-qualifying them before they even break the glass? Something to think about. It was a long time for you. It was a long time for me. It was a long time for anyone. Looks like it's meant to be. No, it's not, Axel. It's not meant to be. Because Axel, here you go. They're talking about CX and concert CX. Nobody shouted out Guns N' Roses for one of those memorable concerts, because these guys, like Axl Rose, would be 3 hours late for stuff. Before the reunion, there was 2 guys in my agency that went to that show. And I think they went to Hamilton to Cops Coliseum, and I remember them coming back the next morning, and they were like, those MFers were 3.5 hours before they got on stage. That's actually what broke up the band. Slash shut down the band because he was so pissed at Axl coming on stage late like that every night, because Slash understood the CX. Like, you can't make people wait like that. You can't have people pay $90 a ticket on a school night with the babysitter taking care of the kids, and you're in Hamilton waiting for Axl Rose to, like, take a sweet time and get out on stage.
Isn't that how Axl Rose got all the ownership of the rights of the songs? Is because he wouldn't go out on stage. Slash cared so much about finally going out and giving a concert that they signed over the rights to him.
Yeah, something along those lines. Like he handcuffed him so much, and that's the thing. Like Slash is a performer and understands what the audience is there to get, like what the audience is there to pay for. And that's the same thing. This is almost like turnstiling. It's like every time you make a customer wait, every time you walk away from them, every time you go just get a manager, every time you just, I'll be right back, every time your phone goes off and you take that text or phone, I just got to take this. Every time you walk away from the customer, you're Axl Rosing them. Let's use that term moving forward. Oh, you just totally Axl Rose that guy. Because turnstyling's too, it's too old school. Let's just call it you Axl Rose them. Because you do. Every time you make someone wait, you're killing that experience for them. And no one likes to wait. They'll wait if there's a purpose behind it. If you're waiting with them and you're doing something, so think about that time. Like think about the things you're doing in case finance is busy and you can't get that person in because both your finance managers are working deals with people, but one's been in there for maybe 25 minutes. Like on our platform, we can see, okay, we've got a finance manager who's been in for 25 minutes. We're usually 30 minutes in finance per customer. We've got 5 more minutes. Why don't you and I do the tech? It's just thinking about what can you do to keep your customer engaged so they never have to wait. Because that is the thing that killed, again, these guys were like the Smiths. These guys came out like their first album did nothing for a full year and then they were the biggest band ever. And I don't think that was 10 years maybe, right? If you look at their whole timeline before they broke up. Okay, timing is everything. We're in the home stretch here. So bands like the Stones, like U2, like Springsteen, Garth Brooks, they're all well-run organizations, right? They're not just bands. They are big corporations. They are organizations. And they understand the consistency of being in front of their audience and how to be in front of it, even if they're not playing. It's album releases, it's interviews, it's side projects, it's different things. Maybe it's a documentary, maybe it's a movie. Like Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters is brilliant at that, right? Like there's a lot of content he produces in between stuff. Those organizations, not just the band, understand how to stay in front of people. And that's that consistency. And there's a reason why all of these bands are the highest grossing live acts, is because by the time they get back out in front of these audiences, people can't wait to give you their money, right? And that's that consistency of staying in front of them all the time, right? Just different ways, different pieces of content, strategically moving them through their funnels until it's time to play again, or it's time to bring them back into your concert venue for your own show for them, okay? So use their time when you're not in front of the customers. Think about that. What are you doing when you're not in front of a customer? Like we talked about earlier, are we standing around, are we hanging around waiting for walk-ins? Or are we actually doing things that can actually make our dealership better? Maybe you like to write. Maybe there's a blog you can write for the dealership website on something that you're passionate about in the dealership or a facet of the business. Maybe you're working your CRM, and I get it. You can't spend every minute of every day working the CRM, but maybe you're out doing some community work, or there's all sorts of things you can be doing as a dealership employee because you have 5.5 hours of your day where you're not in front of a customer. I have the data, and the data doesn't lie. I got 12 years of data that shows you are not in front of a customer for 5 hours of your day. So if you're too busy to do things that are asked of you, or too busy to do otherwise, I will call shenanigans on that because there's just too much time. And it's interesting too now, I've been doing this experiment for about 2 months now where I'm literally clocking every second of every day. I'm using Clockify app on my browser, and I'm literally time tracking every little thing and every big thing I work on to like really look at where I'm spending my time and how I'm spending it, because I want to practice what I preach.
How much is on spell check?
How much is on spell check? Oh my God, like 16 hours.
Go back. Use Grammarly.
You do Grammarly. Go back?
Go back.
Why?
No,
Shut up. You've had your time, Webb. Sit down. Go. Don't you have a nap to take or something? Yours. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Just sit. Just stay down. Exactly. No kidding. So the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was a huge album. That timing is everything. And when her album came out, her solo album came out, she was the biggest thing in R&B. They were hoping for Lauryn, like they were literally hoping Lauryn, like they had everything, like the perfect package of everything. And that album of hers was brilliant. Won all these Grammys. Like they had movies lined up for her. They had everything lined up for her. And she was like, nah, I'm going to go crazy. And but not that she did, but it just like her behavior got really erratic. She didn't show up for stuff. You know, she refused to do things. Like, and I get it. You're an artist, and you can have your own. You can have your own persona in your own life. You can. Nina Simone, classic pre-example of Lauryn Hill. Like Lauryn Hill was like the second version of Nina Simone. Nina Simone, for those of you who don't know, jazz ingenue, brilliant singer, and then she decided, hey man, like I'm going to do my own thing, and like kind of disappeared, right? And so Lauren did the same thing, and for her own reasons. However, she came back and got, every time she came back though, and got in front of audiences, and this is the thing, I don't care how you act and I don't care what you want to do with yourself, but every time she got back in front of audiences though, she brought the erratic behavior with her. Super late, like Axl Rose for gigs, not showing up different things. It's like, you know what? If people are taking the time to come see you and they want to see you and they want to like revel in your artistry, don't keep crazy at home. Like bring the pro version of the show to the stage. Bring the pro version of your show to your dealership. You know, take that time and really bring that. Don't be erratic when you're doing things, right? So it's an extreme look at it, but it's the other thing too, because I think sometimes we do that. Our erratic behavior is talking about all the stuff we do on social media. That's our erratic behavior. Posting stuff going, you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm still crushing it at work. Or I'm still doing something and I'm grustling, right? Like we call it grustling, when you're hustling and grinding all at the same time and you're doing it so fast you're now grustling. So you use that. It's one of ours. But I say that because so often we're using social media, again, to say all of the stuff that we're doing, but actually, in fact, we're not doing anything. It's like being at shows here. It's like, yeah, I'm here at Game Changer, but then I left and I got back to my store and I didn't take anything back with me that I could take to a meeting. I could write into a brief, maybe share with people, go, hey, I learned a couple really cool things. Even the small stuff, even a couple things you could take away from Joe's to go, hey, a couple things from Joe's for CRM that we could be doing. Let's take a look at it. As long as there's something actionable you can take away. Because that's our erratic behavior. We can go away to shows and we can get really lit up at the content we're hearing and the speakers like myself that you're listening to, but it's how you enable it afterwards. And that's a consistency instead of being erratic. Instead of going to shows, getting our heads full of thought and then posting all about it, but then not doing anything about it. And that is really tough, right? If you don't follow any process, it ultimately blows up on you, right? It's going to blow up on your team. It's going to blow up in your business. I don't care how you do it or don't do it, but you've got to have some sort of accountable process, okay? No one is bigger than the band or the store. Remember what I said, these guys are organizations, right? Bands are organizations, they're corporations. No one is bigger than, like the Stones need a record company. They need a record company to produce, like to press the albums, distribute them, sell them. They need management and financial teams to run that business, sell the merchandise. Charlie Watt of the Stones took all their merchandise in-house back in the 80s because he saw how, he understood the data and saw how much money they were losing to outside vendors selling and having all the rights to their stuff. Right? But the engine that runs the Stone, the engine that runs Springsteen, they're all those things. So anyone that's out there that's telling you at their store that they're bigger than the store, that they're the reason that store's successful, I call bullshit again, because you don't have anything unless that manufacturer is building you cars, right? You're not bigger than the store, because if you don't have a manufacturer, you don't have cars to sell. If you don't have a GM that's empowering you to be a blabbermouth on social media and talking about how great you are and allowing you to do that stuff, that's fine if they're empowering you to do that and you love your job and you're selling stuff and you're doing good business for them. But that general manager is empowered, like that general manager is your road manager. He's giving you the venue in which to do it. You are not bigger than the store. Rock stars and automotives are not bigger than the store, because without all the other pieces, they have nothing to perform with. They have nothing to give a customer or their audience when that audience breaks the glass. And that's the thing we need to always understand is we aren't. And that's best working in a team instead of always empowering the individual, because I can also tell you, I've done like closed door meetings with small groups of dealers that have talked about allowing the rock stars to get away with things that has critically hurt their business. And from the words of one of them, if I knew how much money I had to pay out to correct things one of our rock stars did at our dealership, I would have gotten rid of them earlier. But we turned a blind eye to stuff and it killed our culture. From an HR standpoint, from a legal standpoint. These are the things you have to remember. No one is bigger than your organization's mentality of what you want to do for your customer, right? So again, sustaining an audience is hard. It demands a consistency of thought, of purpose, and of action over a long period of time. That's the thing you always have to remember, and take it from Springsteen and take it from Richards. Yeah, look at Keith. He's not the best looking guy anymore, but he understands it. He understands longevity, and he's wildly successful, and he's one of the happiest guys you'll ever meet. Like, how can you not be? Look at this guy's life. but he understands the business of it, and he's enjoying himself. So I hope that you take some of the stories. I hope you take some of the lessons from some of our legendary rock stars. And if you're going to make people or yourselves in your organization a rock star, make them legendary, because then it's more of a team effort. Good? That's it. All done.